Oh, can you tell us about the Star Tours attraction? Was it planned from the beginning, or was it added at the last minute to increase capacity?
It was originally part of the program to put Star Tours in. And so our original budget was to put 4 cabs in, to put four simulators in, And so I designed it on the back of the land just because, where the cabs go, it's you can just put those in, warehouse buildings, and doesn't need to be very much. It's all about the pre-show and then going into the ride. That's where it was. And it was always planned to be there. It was always part of the program. But it was going to be behind the railroad. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to make sure that we maintained, kind of this overall theme. So when you think about, and I go back to this reoccurring thing about like icons, I decided, late in the game, and it didn't go over well with a lot of the management in Paris, but I fought it anyway. I wanted the X-Wing fighter over the entrance, and so the entrance to the queue. So, I sent out drawings, and about a year later, it showed up in all these boxes, and we built it. So that I would rather have had the X-Wing fighter out in front and play the building down, because the building, when we designed the building, there's another subject. Remind me that I want to talk about if you have time, but about corporate sponsorships. When we did Star Tours, what I did is that I pushed the building back about 50 feet. And I said, they're going to want to have sponsors, so we should provide a post show for that. And I was exactly right. You just have to push back on these things. I mean, like, I'm dealing with, I'd been there for a long time. So, I mean, I knew what these things were going to be. And I also knew that Discoveryland was going to have a lot of sponsors. So, and we did, so the sponsorship issue was an additional burden because what happens is that traditionally in all the Disneyland parks, the corporate sponsorship comes into Tomorrowland's. So I figured this would be the same thing. So I think on opening day for Disneyland Paris, we had a total of 11 corporate sponsors. So trying to go back to your question, like, yes, it was always planned to be there for opening day. So throughout the course of the park, of the development of the park, and actually even through the construction of the park, we were always getting notes back from the studio, and the studio was concerned about, like, oh, we didn't build the park big enough. We don't have enough capacity, and what are we going to do? And so there was a meeting that I'd heard about. I wasn't invited to, but it was a meeting I heard about that Marty was trying to got with Tony Baxter and Tom Morris and I don't know, whoever else was around at the time, saying, how do we increase capacity of the park? So, I'd heard the rumor and I went, okay, I know how to do it. I can do it, and I can give you an answer in 2 seconds, but I wasn't invited to the meeting. So I'm like, okay, well, you have to wait till, I got to find out. So finally, I finally hear about this, and I get invited to the meeting, and they're all trying to add attractions where we didn't have land, and how are we going to do it? And so what I had done is when I laid the land out, not only did I push Star Tours back for a potential post show, and if it didn't happen to post show, then don't build the building. But it was like the building was pushed back. If you don't have the land within the park itself, you can't move buildings. So you might as well just take a bet, push the thing back. Well, the other thing I did is that I made Star Tours and put those 4 cabs in there, right, or 4 simulators in. But what happens is I made sure that we had a property line that went farther back. So in case someday, if we wanted to add more attractions, we could add 2 more bays for the Star Tours. So I go into this meeting and they're like, okay, well, so what do you got in Discoveryland? I go, well, why don't we just add 2 more bays to Star Tours? He said, well, what about, the service road going on? No, I pushed it all back. It's all fine. You got room. I got room. So that immediately went into production. So we got 6, we have a total of 6 there now. So it gives a higher capacity, This will tell you how operations works. Okay. I mean, I don't really care about any of this stuff anyway. So it's just kind of an irony if you really want to know how these things work. So when we started and laid out, put in Tomorrowland, and the queue line was in the front. Okay, so operations has requirements for queue areas, how much queue area you need, and it's based on the capacity of the attraction. So if you have 1,500 or 1,600 per hour capacity, then they take a percentage of that and say like, well, we need queue area of this number of square meters, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, great. So we used up the space. We were landscaping, everything was done. So then what happens is that after we had done this whole thing, they were going to add 2 more simulators. So the capacity went up to 2,000 an hour. So operations comes to me and says, okay, well, now based on this, the percentage of it, you're going to need more queue line. And I said, why? Well, you have a higher capacity. I go, yeah, but we just added 2 more simulators. So why would we add more capacity? You actually should take away, because we have now more capacity in the ride, and you would have less people standing in line. Make sense? Mm-hmm. No? It's like it was so, I think their heads exploded. They go, no, you don't understand how this works. I go, I understand exactly how it works. I understand it precisely, because you have now more capacity in the ride. You don't need more queue. You need less queue. I don't think they ever got it. I mean, eventually they did. And there were some guys, there were some really smart people in ops. And after you present it, they all kind of look up to the sky and they like, you know what? I think that makes sense. It makes sense. So, there was never, the queue line was never filled, it was always like flowing through. And obviously on super crowded days, you would have it filled, but that's going to happen anyway, no matter what you do. So why would you want to redesign, stop design, reconfigure everything? You don't want to do that. More capacity, less queue, that's just the way it goes. It's just, that's just the way it works. And on top of that, we couldn't change it anyway. So I thought, well, you better get on board, because that's the way it's going to go. But anyway, the attraction ended up being good. And then IBM came in later, and, it worked out okay. But, the sponsorship thing, sponsorship money for the opening day, and we had all these 7 attractions, which we had additional burdens, and management was not really that, they don't really care about that kind of stuff until they find out how much money is generated by the corporate sponsorship. And then suddenly they're like, yes, sir, whatever you need, whatever you need. So, we had 7 sponsors, and I think they brought in like $250 million over 10 years of corporate sponsorship fees or something like that.
At least IBM was a memorable post show, because I remember having lots of with Roxanne, the photo booth,
Bob Azot, the experience,
everything,
quite inspired maybe the new pre-show of Star Tours 2, the game you remember. Mm-hmm. So it was really a good post show, because it was really selling the image of IBM as a high-tech company. It was really matching really well,
but still in the theme of the ride.
I mean, that was, and that's why they, when corporate sponsorship comes in, they pay a sponsorship, plus they have to pay for all that, the development of all those interactives, and it's a lot of money. It's really, I don't know what they spent, but I know it's really expensive. I liked Captain EO when it first came out, because it was different and it was unique, and it was developed at Imagineering. I know the guys who were involved in it, and so it was great. And actually, I went out to the Culver City Studios when they were shooting it one day. I did the original Captain EO poster, and I had to meet with. I met with Michael's attorney about that. So I had to go to the Culver City Studios, and I remember walking in when they were filming it, or they were just getting ready to film, and I was watching, the whole, when all those, there was a group of about 20 men, women, they're all kind of singing sync, and Michael's in front and all that stuff.
Yes.
That was the scene, and I was watching all of those people rehearse, and George Lucas was there, and Francis Ford Coppola was there, and the whole crew was, everyone's standing around there waiting for Michael to show up. And so I watched these people all rehearse, and they were really, really great. I mean, they were really good, So Francis Ford Coppola, I'm sitting in the background. I was waiting to talk with Michael Jackson's lawyer about this artwork, and they kept saying no and whatever. But anyway, so I went back and watched the production and watched these people rehearse. And then finally, as I'm standing there, I hear Coppola like, okay, let's go. Let's get Michael out here. Come on, let's go. And the point I was going to make is that Michael finally shows up. He finally shows up, and it was quite extraordinary in a sense that, you know, he comes out and he's really kind of meek, you know. He's like, okay, where do I stand?
Well, you do the voice pretty well.
So he stands out there in front, and then they start the beat track. And I got to tell you, I thought these other dancers were really good, but Michael was like 50% better than all. He was unbelievable.
For sure.
And that was my first experience watching him perform. And I'm like, you know, 25 feet away from him. And he was like, you know, very aggressive and, you know, really thrusting and pushing. You know, it's like, and they go, okay, cut. So as soon as they go cut, he's like, back down to, how is that? It was extraordinary. I mean, it wasn't. It was just like this. You know, it's like a flower opening of this talent. You know, it was just unbelievable. But when he wasn't on, he wasn't on. He was just very shy and very quiet and all that. And so, I mean, and then every time I see the movie, I think about that. I think about that. It was like, number one, being a movie and being in a theater, we knew we could change it out. So it's not, the theater is the theater, and you can change movies out. That's number one. Number two, we had it in the can, and we had it. You know, so why would we want to go and, I mean, I you know, I cannot stress enough this whole issue of in those days, and I'm going back, you know, 25 years or 30 years or whatever it was, you know, you had to keep projects on budget. And so where do you want to put your money? And do you want to put in, you know, and I'm like, you know, you could sit there and go, well, let's reinvent something else. And that means, okay, that's great. You can do that if you want. Take something else out. Maybe you don't get I'll tell you what, would you rather say like, hey, let's go all out and make something interesting in Visionarium and make a Circle Vision movie, you know, do something like that and put the robot in, or not do that and make two attractions that are maybe less. So you're taking a chance saying like, well, you know, Michael Jackson's still going to be popular, and he's so weird anyway, so maybe people will be interested. And if after 4 or 5 years, because we're going to be so successful,
oops,
then we can do another movie. And so, you know, they kind of recycle it. And so you, as producer, I go from director to producer when it goes to the field. So when I'm a producer doing that, you know, you have to say like, it's okay. And on top of that, there was a lot of forces behind it. I'm sure Theme Park Productions and Tom Fitzgerald, they're like, hey, let's just put it in. And, you know, I had other things to worry about. Remember, I was always, in my mind, I was building a land, plus I was building a land that was to come. And the Space Mountain thing was a big deal. And I knew it was the only time, you know, I had to focus on how do we make sure there's land for this. I don't want to paint myself into a corner and not have the money or not have the land to do the attraction. So if they go Captain EO, and Captain EO is fine. If you don't think it's great entertainment, you know it's going to be a fascination. Okay, so people are going to show. And if people want to walk out and they go, boy, that guy's really weird. Or you think, wow, he's got a talent. Whatever it is, they're going to go see it. So, you know, you have to always, you're not looking at one attraction at a time. You're looking at collectively on how things all work together. Occasionally the studio showing up saying, or sending notes to Marty going, we need more capacity. We need more capacity. We need to get, you know, we're going to get killed. We underestimated it, you know. So they go, okay, fine, you know, so you got to lay out an Autopia. And now, okay, so now here becomes the big issue, is that if you look in a plan view of what Discoveryland looks like, there was a lot of land there, you know, behind Main Street. So I had a guy working for me, a guy by the name of Steve Brooks, and he was laying out, you know, they come in and go, okay, you need an Autopia there. So I was betting on we were going to do Space Mountain, you know, the 100-meter diameter one. I told Steve, lay the track layout out, but, you know, I'm going to give you these boundaries. Do not cross over this, because I'm absolutely counting on building Space Mountain. we're going to do this. And it's there's another tradition about Space Mountain. Space Mountains are never there on opening day. They always come later. So that's one of the reasons why they delayed it. But they also had financial issues. But anyway, I said, and he goes, well, how big is Space Mountain going to be? And I go, I don't know. You cannot go past this line. Okay, you can't. So we had so imagine, it's kind of like saying, I have a room and I'm going to buy a sofa someday, so I can't buy a big table. Well, how big is the table going to be? I don't know. And how big is the sofa going to be? I don't know. So you just kind of do a guess. And I said, well, lay it out. And we kept compressing it. And frankly, I learned a lot one time when I went through the Jungle Cruise at Disneyland when the water was out. And Jungle Cruise seems like it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Everything is a series of switchbacks. The relative space, it's relatively compact, but because you have barriers in between, like landscaping, you don't really know where you are. But it's really small, but it's like a string that you lay out with a bunch of curves in it. So I said, just do the same thing with that. So we did lay it out, and I wanted people to look down on the ride, so we excavated and had people looking down, and it was in there. Okay, let's talk about the theming for that for a minute. So in each one of the attractions, as I mentioned, you're going to take an era when something was the most popular. Okay, so when you look at Jules, when you look at the Orbitron, or you look at Visionarium, the building is meant to represent kind of this. I use the observatory up at Griffith Park here as the design. And I said, it's a kind of a deco style, and everything has to represent like that. It's meant to be like a scientific laboratory, and Visionary and Videopolis was going to be like a big airship hangar with its exposed metal and all that stuff. So I said, for Autopia, the popularity of Disney had a TV show, again, one of the Tomorrowland favorites of mine, called Magic Highways. And it was like this kind of 1930s, 1940s popular science magazine covers, like someday you will be able to drive from New York to Los Angeles on a freeway. And they had all these kind of streamlined cars and all that. And I go, that's the theme. That's its future. Its future is going to be that. So we designed all these kind of, rotating buildings and deco style kind of things, and designed the cars with fins on them, and, did all that stuff, and then put billboards on it because this was going to be, a magic highway leading you from one place to another. And so that was the overall theme of it. And so we just had to crank, and I designed the car bodies. We had the bodies made up in Midlands of England, because that's where they build car bodies, and Zimprella, I think, made the chassis. And so it was a last minute, but it wasn't a building, so we did a lot of landscaping, and I wish the cars had been better, and there's a lot of there were some challenges in it, but we got there, and I just wish I always wish the cars are better and easier to drive. That's why when I went to Hong Kong, I did Autopia there, but I have electric cars, but as usual, Imagineering made them too complex and they couldn't keep them going. But Autopia is really a legacy project, a legacy experience for the guests. There's nothing better than when you have a child who's 7 or 8 years old and he can drive dad or mom around. I mean, it's a whole deal. Everybody remembers our Autopia experience, and so it was a good attraction, and we kind of made it themed. And again, another thing to get people interacting with is to put the car out in front. You could sit in it and photo op and all that stuff. So,
So maybe one topic that we would like to talk about is the rides that never existed and were planned for Discoveryland. So we heard about the Spark Gap Coaster, we heard about the Skyway, we heard about things like that. Do you want to talk a little about the original ideas that you had to scrap from the original concept of Discoveryland, or where all these information just fun stuff and never happened?
Sure. I mean, I think, I can't go through, I've probably forgotten all the things that we talked about, in terms of future, or not even future attractions, but original ones. Kind of like you put it in, you suggest it, you you put in an idea for it and you try it, and then it may work, it may not work. The Spark Gap Coaster was basically a kind of like a mousetrap, or like a
white mouse, yeah.
A wild mouse, yeah, thanks. But it had, crackling neon, and it was meant to be like a transformer that you're flying through, but it would have been, in order to dress it right so it doesn't look like an off-the-shelf ride, you have to spend a lot of money on it. And so, and it's a relatively low capacity. I know they used something like that for the Indiana Jones ride there. I think Tom Morris used that. But, it was like one of those considerations. There was an earlier rendering done with a Skyway in Discoveryland, but it was never really seriously considered. I think that there are, every Skyway we've had in all the parks, they always get taken out, especially in Florida, because although they have spectacular transportation Skyway there now, but the Skyways always get taken out because, first of all, the units themselves are too small, and then they're subjected to weather and wind, especially wind, and especially in Florida. So they just don't use them. So, I mean, it might have been considered briefly, but not really seriously. Another attraction was, as you come into Discoveryland, on the right side, there was going to be kind of a smaller cafe there connected to another attraction. And that's when we were developing Alien Encounter. And
What? Alien Encounter in Discoveryland?
You've never heard this before?
No.
Wait a second.
Let's not get too revved up about this, because basically what happened is that Alien Encounter was being developed for Florida, and it was all, if you went through it, was all based on binaural sound.
Yeah. It was a huge technology that they pushed with the ride to immerse more the people inside and have the alien really surround them. Yeah. So yes,
that's correct. But I remember my very first experience with binaural sound, 3D sound.
Yeah.
And I was completely amazed. It was really extraordinary. If you've ever experienced it, you know what it is. And the demonstration, it's like most demonstrations, they have a whole series of gags that they put together, like somebody cutting your hair.
Yeah, I did that with the Sounds Dangerous experience with Drew Carey at MGM Studios at the time.
Yeah. Right. That's exactly right. And that was really kind of the test reel. And when I heard it, years and years ago, it was like, well, we want to develop an attraction, of course. And it lent itself to it because, we're all kind of, as I said, I've been stressing more than anything else, visual attractions, and visual experiences. But this was, the audio part of it. The problem is that by the time they got into doing the attraction, there were complications with actually using headphones or earphones or earbuds or sound. And they had to kind of make some changes. And for some reason, it just never, ever delivered the level of attraction that they were wanting it to be. It never really came to fruition. So anyway, I had laid out this building and there's a big berm there right now. But there was always going to be another attraction. There was going to be a rocket sitting right out in front too of that attraction where this cafe was going to be. It's a little bit like the same rocket I did for the Tomorrowland in Hong Kong when I designed that.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, it's a concept tower where we see the entrance with the big rockets with the bronze and gold. Is that it?
Yeah, it's the rendering's all blue and it's got a blue background to it and all that. So anyway, so that was one thing. I'm not sure. I mean, you guys are all surprised like that, but I mean, there's probably a dozen things I just don't remember. It was when you develop something, you're spending all your time. There's so much energy it has to go into that. If you we may have come up with 10 other rides, but it's like it didn't work, it didn't fit, and so you just miss them. It just and I wanted to avoid this whole thing that a lot of companies, and sometimes Disney does a little bit, and I've had to do it. Too, buying off the shelf rides and how do you dress them up It is a long-term tradition, for Disney to do that. I mean, the Dumbo ride is one, the carousel is another, but I just kind of wanted to avoid doing that. And the Orbitron was, at least we had the budget to actually take just a simple rocket ride and turn it into something. It's more than the sum of its parts, it's really that kind of thing. So, but yeah, it was definitely Alien Encounter was talked about there, and people were like, hey, what about that? What about that? And it was like, okay. If it's a home run attraction, we'll do it because it would fit. It would have fit,
And how so?
I just think after a while, it just didn't quite deliver. So, it's like anything creatively. You throw ideas at the wall and you see what sticks. And the only thing that sticks, the things that stick are the ones that feel that they're for the right audience and fits for the budget and fits for the theme and fits for all that stuff. So, when you see the final product on all these things, it's like there's a mountain of work and you see just the top bits of it. You just see the small parts of it. So, yeah, so that was it. And was there one other one you mentioned, Spark Gap? And
so, yeah, we had the ideas we had was, these, and then after that, there were the rides inside Discovery Mountain.
Well, okay, that's an interesting question. And I wish I could get really deep into this, but I have to say that in when it comes to things like background music, the position that I take on these kinds of things is that I'm in charge of the overall responsibility of the design of things, but I'm not going to supervise every aspect of that. Now, with the exception of, and I'm going to say just as an exception of, except for the stuff for Space Mountain, which that I was involved with Steve and Steve Brenson, on the guy who did all the music for that. It remind me, and I'm glad you brought this up because I do really want to talk about the music for that. But for the overall land, I think that first of all, to do an hour's worth of music and it was an hour and a half. I can't remember what the cycle is on the music, but
it's about 1 hour. Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of, it's a subliminal thing, I guess, that, but what we did is it was probably two things. It was an idea that kind of worked to the budget. And that happens to be meaning that, as I mentioned to you last time, I think that regarding about the overall attitude about everything in Discoveryland was meant to be timeless, not meant to be Victorian or not meant to be Renaissance or not meant to be
timeless as the visuals of the land.
Yeah, you want something. It's the BGM would probably be the audio version of what the neon rings and neon electrical aspects of the land was meant to be visually. Right. So what you're doing is you're trying to create and recreate music, but and I do believe it was, I think you're right, it was synthesized music, but I think there was clearly an intent to do that, and versus an orchestra, because orchestra would have been horrifically expensive to get music like that. I mean, especially when you think about an hour's worth of music. When we did the music for Space Mountain, and I won't get into that right now, but we had a full orchestra for that, and I sat in the recording sessions for that over at Universal Studios, and it was truly amazing. But yeah, I have to say that I wish I was really smarter about this. I think that I kind of dictate the policy, and then the guys who are in charge of music, they keep coming back to you with, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? And to do music for different eras, it's for some reason, when I was working on all the projects I worked on, I got kind of put on these projects, which I really end up loving, on projects that people really didn't understand what to do with, and a good example of that not only was Discoveryland, but also working on the Disney's California Adventure project, especially the entrance and especially the overall park. When people go, well, what is a Discovery Land? Is it futuristic? Is it tomorrow? Is it yesterday? Is it, whatever it is? And as I mentioned to you guys last time, it was a collection of futures. So the music was a collection of music. And again, being timeless, there's not anything that can be specifically designed or solved that way. You can't go to a book and open it up and go, music that is meant to be, timeless and over a variety of eras and futuristic. And so here, use this. You kind of have to go, that's the creative part that we all have to reach out to and go, how do we solve this problem? Mm-hmm. And as I said, California was the same way. I unfortunately, it ended up being changed out, but the entrance I had to put there, people like, well, okay, go ahead, design something. Okay. And by the way, you have no budget to do that, but go ahead and design it. Well, what is it? Well, we don't know yet. So then of course, you run a risk. You have to create something. And Discoveryland was another way of doing that, of trying to solve a problem or trying to create an atmosphere mm-hmm. and have the music tell that story, but not to overwhelm everything. I mean, it's a very, I'm sorry, I'm floundering here, but I wish I had more.
No, but it's completely understandable if you don't, if you didn't involve particularly in this conception, because you said you have the job to budget, to conceive the overlay, so no problem. It was just by curiosity, because when I asked to David Tolley directly on Facebook, there was no answer, and I'm sorry, because I would like to ask him some questions about the creation of the music, because I love BGM musics, and especially from Discovery Island. But it's okay, no problem. You have so much to do before the opening.
I will tell you. This is a tough question, and I'm not answering it very well. Yeah. And the reason I'm saying what I'm saying is because I completely agree with you in terms about how powerful music is. I really think it is. It really creates a mood and a tempo mm-hmm. that people really get. It's associated with it. It may be even an association. It's on a subliminal basis. The one thing I know is I probably gave them. Okay, wait a minute. So I'm thinking about it now. I'm kind of going back in there. I love the music of Bernard Herrmann. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know Bernard Herrmann.
Yes.
But he did a lot of work for Hitchcock and all that. But he also did The Day the Earth Stood Still, and I mean, he did a lot of really minor key. Major, soundtracks for motion picture studios, and a lot of the science fiction things with theremins and kind of stuff like that. Yeah. But so on one hand, and also being so orchestrated, his work, and I think this is probably one of the notes that I gave them. I said, I just listened to Bernard Herrmann. I just love that kind of music. Also, I believe that the other direction that I gave them is that I felt the music should be heroic.
Very interesting.
Like anthems, big kind of, heroic, what that means. It's meant to be not just background music. Background music sounds so pedestrian, but it's meant to be, charged, and you have a crescendo, and there's
kind of epic.
Epic. Yeah, that's another good word for it. But I mean, because we were focusing on these great European visionaries, in a way, in their own way, they were heroes. So heroic music kind of lend themselves to that. But you can't have everything be an anthem. Everything has to be, it has to vary as it goes. But that's probably what I would say the Bernard Herrmann direction and the heroic aspect of the music would be the primary notes that I gave them.
Okay, so very, very nice, and very thank you a lot. Thank you, because it's very interesting.
I was there, I was there for opening day, in 1992. Mm-hmm. And of course, everyone, I always find it interesting. People are like, opening day capacity wasn't very high and all that. That's only because people don't understand, what goes on.
I've been to 5 openings of Disney parks, Epcot, DCA, Hong Kong Disneyland, Paris, and Epcot Center, right? Okay. Those are the ones I took from the very beginning to the very end. And on opening day, the attendance is they always go, we're going to have 50,000 people there. No, we're not. People are more fans today, but it kind of takes a while for people to kind of like have this stuff grow on them, and really do. But I will remember, and this is the way I am going to end this conversation today, and this will kick us off for the future when we talk again about Paris, is that I remember on opening day in 1992, big festival, big spectacle, balloons, lights, fashion, all this stuff. But there was not the usual energy that you see in a Disney park, because I think this was new. People didn't really, and when I say people, I'm saying the cast members, as well as the guests there, didn't really know what to expect. There's those famous stories about, whoever was it, Jacques Chirac or whoever was head of France at the time, and they were like, it was the, Disney was going to be the cultural Chernobyl, and so people didn't really know what to expect. What is this Disney thing? We don't get any of that. So the enthusiasm was like, it's kind of muted, and there were like 20,000 people there, not really much, and but over the course, and I will say very specific because I was there, over the course of those next 3 years, I think, and I experienced, between the cast members themselves, who really began to understand what this Disney thing was all about, and I may be wrong about this, but my perception is always that Disney tries to maintain the highest quality and make sure the guests are feeling right. And in France, with all due respect to you guys, they wanted to make sure that this was, the guests were treated courteously, and everything was supposed to be done right. And I think the guests themselves who came responded. So I will never forget the opening for Space Mountain over there. I have never seen so many happy French people in my entire life. The cast members, I can't tell you that for 3 years they've been drinking the Kool-Aid, and they were like, this is fantastic. It relaunched the park. The number of people who showed up for that ride, for that attraction, it was phenomenal. It was great. They understood what, the park was all about and what Disney was trying to do. And I've seen this, and believe me, you're not the only ones in this. I've seen this happen all over the world. I've seen it happen in Hong Kong. I've seen it, I've just seen it in other parts of the world where, you get on the train. I was like, because I worked in Hong Kong for a long time. And I remember going out to the park when the park was open, because I always continue on these parks. There's always attractions in Discoveryland or Tomorrowland or whatever it happens to be. And I remember going out to the park and, taking the RER, or no, whatever, no, it's not the RER. It's whatever the Metro, and you go to Penny's Bay, and then the Penny's Bay, you transfer to the monorail thing, or the train going into the park. And you see the people getting on, families, Chinese families with little children, and they're all there with grandma, and they're all excited. And there's this whole kind of thing that people get immersed in, and they recognize, they know what it's like. I don't see that for Universal Parks. I don't see it with any other parks in the world, but people are all kind of seduced by this. And so for a 95, when we opened up, it was a big, big deal. It was a big deal, and it delivered. And, the attendance jumped and all that stuff. So stay tuned next time when we talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Can't wait to talk about it.